In a world captivated by the stories of the past, few discoveries hold as much intrigue as a first-hand account of one of history's most enigmatic figures, Jesus of Nazareth. Imagine finding a letter penned nearly 2 millennia ago by someone who stood at the intersection of power, faith, and destiny. This is no ordinary discovery. It is the letter of Claudia Procula, the wife of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor who presided over the trial of Jesus. In this remarkable document, Claudia describes, in vivid and precise detail, the physical appearance, demeanor, and profound presence of Jesus. Her account goes beyond mere description, revealing a deeply personal struggle and an encounter that altered her life forever. The implications of this letter are staggering. Not only does it offer a rare glimpse into the life and times of Jesus from a Roman perspective, but it also challenges preconceived notions about his appearance and the role of those who witnessed his trial and crucifixion. What did he truly look like? How did his presence stir the hearts of those who met him? And why did Claudia, a Roman woman of influence and privilege, feel compelled to intervene in his fate? Before we unravel the layers of this extraordinary account, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, where we explore the hidden truths, ancient mysteries, and untold stories that shape our understanding of the past. Claudia Procula's name may not immediately ring a bell for many, but her story is one that deserves to be told. As the wife of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, Claudia lived in a time and place of great tension and upheaval. The Roman Empire had extended its reach into the region, imposing its rule upon a diverse and often resistant population. This was not merely a clash of cultures, but a profound collision of religious beliefs, political ambitions, and social unrest. At the heart of this turmoil was the figure of Jesus, a man whose teachings, miracles, and growing following had begun to unsettle both the Jewish leaders and the Roman authorities. Claudia, born into a life of privilege, had a unique vantage point on these events. A Roman citizen by birth, she was accustomed to the opulence and order of the empire. Yet her life in Jerusalem exposed her to a world that was vastly different from the one she had known. The Jewish people, with their deep-seated faith and traditions, intrigued her. Despite the power and influence of Rome, there was something indomitable about the spirit of the Jewish populace that Claudia found both puzzling and inspiring. It was within this charged atmosphere that Claudia first became aware of Jesus. Reports of his miracles and teachings reached even the Roman elite. Claudia heard whispers of a man who healed the sick, raised the dead, and spoke with an authority that transcended human understanding. She was not alone in her curiosity. Many among the Roman and Jewish populations were captivated by him. Yet, for Claudia, this was more than mere intrigue. There was something about Jesus that resonated with her on a deeply personal level, sparking an inner conflict that she could neither explain nor ignore. As the tension in Jerusalem escalated, Claudia found herself increasingly drawn into the unfolding drama. Jesus' growing influence posed a challenge to the established order. Jewish leaders viewed him as a threat to their authority, while Roman officials, including her husband, saw him as a potential agitator capable of inciting rebellion. Pilate, tasked with maintaining order in the region, found himself under immense pressure to act decisively. Claudia, observing these events from the sidelines, experienced a profound sense of unease. Though she was not a direct participant in the political machinations of the time, she could not escape their implications. Her feelings about Jesus were complicated. On one hand, she was a Roman, bound by loyalty to her husband and the empire. On the other hand, she was a woman of conscience, moved by the accounts of Jesus' compassion and wisdom. Claudia struggled to reconcile these conflicting allegiances. Her encounters with Jesus, whether through second-hand stories or fleeting moments of observation, left an indelible impression on her. There was something about him, his calm demeanor, his penetrating gaze, and the profound sense of purpose he exuded, that unsettled and inspired her in equal measure. For Claudia, this was not merely an intellectual struggle, it was an emotional and spiritual one. The teachings of Jesus, with their emphasis on love, forgiveness, and humility, contrasted sharply with the values of the Roman world. Claudia began to question the moral foundations of the society she had always taken for granted. She saw in Jesus a purity of spirit that stood in stark contrast to the corruption and brutality of the empire. It was this growing awareness that set the stage for the extraordinary events to come. As her inner turmoil deepened, Claudia found herself in a unique and precarious position. She was both a witness to history and a participant in its unfolding drama. Her perspective, shaped by her Roman heritage and her growing empathy for the Jewish people, gave her insights that few others possessed. The figure of Jesus, at once a man and a mystery, loomed large in her thoughts. Little did she know that her connection to him would soon become inextricable, forever altering the course of her life and the pages of history. One fateful night, Claudia Procula experienced a dream so vivid, so haunting, that it shook her to her core. In the dream, she saw Jesus, not merely as a man, but as a figure of unparalleled radiance and sorrow. His face, calm yet marked by a profound weight of impending suffering, seemed to speak directly to her soul. The dream was not just a fleeting image, it was a deeply symbolic vision, filled with a mix of light and shadow, warnings and revelations. She saw crowds jeering, the glint of a whip cutting through the air, and a crown of thorns pressed cruelly onto his head. Overwhelmingly, she felt a sense of divine presence, a warning that what was about to unfold was not an ordinary series of events, but something sacred and of cosmic significance. Claudia awoke trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. The images were burned into her memory, as if she had witnessed the events firsthand. She knew instinctively that this dream was not a mere fabrication of her mind. It was a message, perhaps from the gods she had been taught to revere, or from a power beyond her comprehension. What unsettled her even more was the undeniable certainty that her husband, Pontius Pilate, was at the center of the unfolding events. She felt an urgent need to act, to intervene, to somehow prevent the catastrophe she had glimpsed in her vision. With the first light of dawn, Claudia approached Pilate, her face pale and her voice trembling. She described her dream in painstaking detail, imploring him to reconsider his stance on Jesus. "Have nothing to do with that righteous man," she pleaded, her words filled with a desperation that Pilate had rarely seen in her. She recounted the agony she had witnessed in her vision, the sense of injustice that permeated every scene, and the overwhelming feeling that condemning Jesus would bring calamity not only upon him, but upon everyone involved. Pilate listened, his expression a mixture of confusion and irritation. He was a man accustomed to dealing with the tangible, the political, the strategic. Dreams to him were little more than the workings of an overactive imagination. But Claudia was relentless. She reminded him of the rumors surrounding Jesus, of his miracles, his wisdom, and the reverence he inspired among his followers. "This is not an ordinary man," she insisted. There is something divine about him, something we do not fully understand." Pilate, though uneasy, dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand. His focus was on maintaining order, placating the volatile crowds, and avoiding any political misstep that might draw the ire of Rome. Claudia's dream, as vivid and troubling as it was, seemed to him a distraction from the pressing realities of governance. The trial of Jesus began under the harsh light of day, the tension in the air palpable. Claudia, though not physically present, felt the weight of the proceedings as if she were standing in the midst of the throng. She knew Pilate's mind was torn. She had seen it in his eyes during their conversation. The crowd's cries for crucifixion grew louder, their anger fueled by the religious leaders who saw Jesus as a threat to their authority. Pilate, increasingly cornered, sought a way to appease the mob without condemning an innocent man. He offered to release Jesus as part of the Passover tradition of clemency. But the crowd, stirred into a frenzy, demanded the release of Barabbas instead. Claudia's heart sank as the events unfolded. From her vantage point, she could feel the suffocating pressure bearing down on her husband. Pilate was not a cruel man by nature. He was pragmatic, a man of reason caught in an impossible situation. Yet, as the cries of the crowd grew louder, drowning out reason and compassion, she realized the inevitable was drawing near. Pilate, desperate to absolve himself of responsibility, symbolically washed his hands before the assembly, declaring that he was innocent of Jesus' blood. To Claudia, this act was both tragic and futile. She saw it not as an assertion of innocence, but as an acknowledgement of his helplessness in the face of overwhelming forces. As Jesus was led away to be crucified, Claudia felt a wave of anguish unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had tried to intervene, tried to warn her husband, but her efforts had been in vain. The weight of her dream, the sorrow of witnessing such profound injustice, pressed heavily on her soul. In the privacy of her chambers, she wept, not only for Jesus, but for the world that had chosen violence and hatred over compassion and love. For Claudia, the trial was more than a legal proceeding. It was a profound moral and spiritual reckoning. She saw in Jesus a reflection of everything humanity could aspire to, and in the mob's fury, a reflection of its darkest impulses. The stark contrast between the two left her shaken. Though she could not alter the course of events, the trial marked a turning point in her understanding of the world and her place within it. Jesus, though condemned, had left an indelible mark on her heart, and she knew that his story was far from over. The crucifixion of Jesus was an event that Claudia Procula could not bring herself to witness directly, yet it consumed her thoughts as though she stood at the foot of the cross. From the moment the sentence was passed, she felt an unbearable heaviness, as if the weight of the skies themselves had descended upon her. The entire city seemed to hold its breath, caught between the fury of the mob and the quiet resignation of the man they had condemned. For Claudia, it was not just the injustice of the act that tore at her soul. It was the realization that something far greater, far more profound, was transpiring. As reports filtered back to her about the procession to Golgotha, Claudia's imagination filled in the harrowing details. She could almost hear the jeers of the crowd, the crack of the whip, and the labored breathing of Jesus as he carried the wooden crossbeam through the streets. The brutality of it all was unfathomable to her, a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for cruelty. And yet, amidst the chaos, she imagined Jesus remaining calm, his eyes filled not with anger or fear, but with an unearthly peace. This image haunted her, the notion that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, he bore himself with a grace that defied comprehension. When news reached her that Jesus had been nailed to the cross, Claudia felt an overwhelming sense of despair. She imagined the scene in vivid detail: the hammer striking the nails, the sharp cries of pain, and the oppressive silence that followed. She pictured the soldiers indifferent and efficient in their gruesome task, and the onlookers, some weeping, others reveling in the spectacle. Her heart broke as she thought of Mary, Jesus' mother, standing among the crowd, her anguish mirrored in Claudia's own spirit. Though she did not share Mary's faith, Claudia felt a kinship with her, a shared sorrow that transcended their differences. The hours dragged on, and the atmosphere grew increasingly strange. The skies darkened, as if nature itself recoiled from the atrocity unfolding below. A chill settled over the city, unnatural and foreboding. Claudia, sitting alone in her chambers, felt the walls close in around her. She could not shake the feeling that this was not just the death of a man, but the culmination of something far greater, a moment that would ripple through history and beyond. As the day wore on, Claudia's anguish deepened. She was tormented by the thought that she had not done enough to prevent this tragedy. Her pleas to Pilate, her warnings, her desperate attempts to convey the significance of her dream, they all seemed futile now. She blamed herself, not for Jesus' fate, but for failing to act more decisively, for failing to find the words that might have swayed her husband. In her mind, she replayed the moments leading up to the trial, searching for the one thing she could have said or done differently to change the outcome. But there was nothing. The events had unfolded as though they were preordained, a tragic inevitability that no human intervention could alter. Claudia was not alone in her distress. Throughout the city, there were whispers of the unnatural occurrences accompanying Jesus' death. The veil of the temple had torn in two, an unthinkable event that sent shockwaves through the Jewish community. The earth trembled, the ground splitting in places as if the very foundation of the world had been shaken. To Claudia, these were not mere coincidences. They were signs, terrifying and awe-inspiring, of the profound significance of what had just occurred. She felt the weight of the divine in every tremor, every shadow, every anguished cry. As the day turned to evening, Claudia was overcome with a sense of profound loss. It was not just the loss of a man, but the loss of something she could not fully articulate. Hope, perhaps, or the possibility of a better world. Yet, amidst the sorrow, there was a faint glimmer of something else. Claudia could not explain it, but she felt that this was not the end. The darkness that had descended upon the city was heavy and oppressive, but it was not absolute. There was a sense deep in her heart that light would break through, though she did not know how or when. For Claudia, the crucifixion was more than an event. It was a revelation. She saw in it the depths of human cruelty, but also the heights of human courage and love. She saw in Jesus a man who had faced the worst that the world could offer and had met it with forgiveness and grace. She did not yet understand the full significance of what had happened, but she knew that it had changed her. The sorrow she felt was not the end of her journey, but the beginning of something new, a search for meaning, for truth, for redemption. As the city slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy, Claudia remained haunted by the events of that day. She could not escape the image of Jesus on the cross, his body broken, but his spirit unyielding. She could not forget the darkness that had enveloped the city, nor the trembling of the earth beneath her feet. Most of all, she could not forget the feeling that this was not the end of the story. Deep down, she knew that the crucifixion was not the conclusion, but the prelude to something far greater. The days following the crucifixion were heavy with grief and confusion. For Claudia Procula, the world seemed irreparably altered, as if the very fabric of existence had been torn. The events of that dark day replayed endlessly in her mind. The jeering crowds, the ominous darkness, the trembling earth. She avoided conversation with Pilate, whose demeanor had become even more withdrawn. Though he spoke little of what had transpired, Claudia could sense his unease, his guilt, and his lingering fear that they had been party to something far beyond human comprehension. Then came the whispers. The rumors began quietly, almost furtively, among the servants and townspeople. Some spoke of an empty tomb, others of frightened guards claiming to have seen an angelic figure, and still others of women who had encountered Jesus himself, alive. At first, Claudia dismissed these accounts as wild imaginings or desperate fabrications by his grieving followers. Yet the whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the city, reaching even the highest echelons of Roman authority. Pilate, though outwardly dismissive, ordered an investigation into the disappearance of Jesus' body, fearing it could incite unrest. For Claudia, however, the rumors stirred something deeper. She could not ignore the feeling that these accounts, impossible as they seemed, carried a ring of truth. The supernatural events that had accompanied Jesus' death, the darkened skies, the earthquake, the tearing of the temple veil, had already shaken her understanding of the world. Now, the possibility that Jesus had risen from the dead filled her with both awe and trepidation. She found herself drawn to the stories, listening intently to each new detail, piecing together the accounts like fragments of a puzzle. One evening, Claudia spoke with one of her household servants, a young Jewish woman who had been near the tomb that morning. The woman, trembling with emotion, described how she and others had gone to anoint Jesus' body, only to find the stone rolled away and the tomb empty. She spoke of a figure dressed in radiant white who told them, "He is not here, he has risen." Claudia listened in stunned silence, her mind racing. The woman's account was delivered with such conviction, such earnestness, that Claudia could not dismiss it as mere hysteria. Over the following days, more accounts surfaced, each more astonishing than the last. Some claimed to have seen Jesus walking and speaking, his wounds still visible, yet no longer a source of pain. Others spoke of gatherings where he appeared to his disciples, offering them words of peace and encouragement. The sheer number of witnesses, combined with the consistency of their testimonies, made it increasingly difficult for Claudia to doubt their truth. She began to realize that the resurrection was not merely an event. It was a revelation, a divine act that defied all earthly understanding. The more Claudia contemplated these accounts, the more her heart began to change. She had always felt that Jesus was different, that he carried within him a wisdom and a presence that set him apart. But now she saw him as more than a man. The resurrection, if true, was proof of something far greater, proof that Jesus was not merely a teacher or prophet, but a figure of divine significance. This realization filled her with both wonder and sorrow. She mourned the suffering he had endured, but she also marveled at the power that had triumphed over death itself. For Claudia, this was a turning point. She could no longer view the events surrounding Jesus as mere history or political drama. They were sacred, imbued with a significance that transcended the boundaries of time and space. She found herself questioning everything she had once taken for granted: her Roman upbringing, her allegiance to the empire, even her understanding of the gods. The teachings of Jesus, once intriguing but distant, now resonated with a clarity she'd never experienced before. His emphasis on love, forgiveness, and humility seemed not only revolutionary, but divinely inspired. As days turned into weeks, Claudia began to reflect deeply on her own role in the events that had unfolded. She thought of her dream, the warnings she had received, and her failed attempts to prevent Jesus' condemnation. She felt a deep sense of sorrow and guilt, not for her actions, but for her inability to do more. Yet, she also felt a sense of purpose, a belief that her experience was not merely a tragedy, but a call to transformation. Jesus' resurrection, she realized, was not just a testament to his divinity, but an invitation to all who witnessed it to live differently. In the quiet moments of her reflection, Claudia found herself drawn to the teachings of Jesus with a newfound urgency. She sought out those who had known him, listening to their stories and learning from their wisdom. Though she did not yet consider herself a follower of his way, she felt her heart aligning more and more with his message. The love and forgiveness he had preached, even in the face of unimaginable suffering, inspired her to reevaluate her own life and priorities. Claudia's transformation was not immediate, but gradual, a process of shedding old beliefs and embracing new truths. She found herself becoming more compassionate, more attuned to the struggles of those around her. She began to see the world not through the lens of power and privilege, but through the eyes of those who suffered and hoped for something better. Jesus' resurrection, she realized, was not just an event to be remembered, but a call to action. A reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is the possibility of renewal and redemption. As the news of the resurrection spread beyond Jerusalem, Claudia felt a sense of hope that she had not known before. The man she had tried to save, the man she had watched suffer and die, had risen. His story was not one of defeat, but of victory. A victory not over earthly powers, but over the forces of hatred, despair, and death itself. Claudia knew that she could never return to the life she had lived before. Jesus' life, death, and resurrection had changed her forever, opening her eyes to a truth that transcended all earthly boundaries. In the end, Claudia's journey was one of profound transformation. She began as an outsider, a Roman woman observing the events of Jesus' life from the periphery. But through her dream, her experiences, and her reflections, she became something more, a witness to the divine, a seeker of truth, and a bearer of hope. Though her name would fade into history, her story, like that of Jesus, was one of redemption, a testament to the power of faith, love, and the eternal significance of one extraordinary life.